And welcome back to a new episode of Better Together. Today's episode, we thought about something I think very interesting. And I
You
like
always
it.
say that.
Yeah, because it's always it.
Otherwise, why
right.
would we talk about?
Right. So today, I'm again here, Julian, the host, with my beautiful
Me.
co-host, Caro. Hello.
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 My German.
Nice that we found the time again to record. I'm always looking forward to this.
Yes. And the topic of today is one that nobody will understand until we explain, which is something we've been talking about quite often. It's the concept of personality versus shadow. And
let's start from the very basics beginning.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Or we start with a story.
Let's start with a story.
Okay. So I was about a year ago deciding to start my speaking business, and I was sure that I was putting all my energy, all of my effort in it. And at some point, I came to the realization that one of the aspects of having a business is to do sales. And whenever somebody would encourage me to do sales or talk to me about it, I would completely shut off. I would be like, that's not the way that I want to do business. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to go on LinkedIn and start messaging people. I feel like that's a waste of time. It's blah, 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 blah. And because I'm good at coming up with arguments, and I'm a psychologist, so I know how to make people just go back to their corner and not try to push me further, then I would just stay in that comfort place of not doing sales and being very convinced, even myself, of the arguments that I was coming up with. Yeah. Because I had pretty solid arguments in my mind. But because I call myself on my bullshit all the time, I would still notice there was something off with not wanting to do sales.
Because you were triggered all the time.
I was super triggered. So it was not a normal reaction. It was not like I would react to if you offer me to put olives on the pizza. I would be like, nah, I think I'm fine. It was more like, no, this is not a good idea because of this, and that, and all of those reasons listed in this very long list, so you feel overwhelmed and you stop saying anything. Mm-hmm. So it was different. It was different than just a normal no. So I would feel that, and I would be like, where's that coming from? And
psychologist in you.
Yes, the psychologist in me was calling myself on my own bullshit because other people wouldn't. That's the difficult part about being a psychologist, that other people think you know better all the time, and then you're just you can get away with your shit. So I have to call myself on my bullshit, and that's what I did. I figured that I feared rejection so much that I didn't want to expose myself to it. And I didn't want to go through the process of finding people, messaging them, and then getting rejected. It felt very personal to me. And that's my shadow. The shadow part of a human is that part that is hidden. And it's usually coming from trauma or being insecure, having certain vulnerable places. That's the shadow, and it's hidden. It's not part of the light. So the whole point of the shadow is that it's a part of you that you continue to repeat in your life without even noticing. It's not what you do consciously, but what you do unconsciously, and the origin of it is trauma. Some sort of trauma. It can be big trauma. Gabor Mate speaks of the big T trauma and the small t trauma. Big T trauma being anything that is like a big event, being part of a war, having to exile to a different country, being sexually abused, having a father that would beat you up, like something like that is big T trauma. Small t trauma is when you're being repressed for example, and your family is telling you like, oh, don't laugh so hard, or don't cry.
Yeah.
Or in my case, is being excluded repeatedly from friend groups.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened in school, it happened in high school, and that generated this fear within me of being excluded, being rejected. So then that small t trauma, repeated over time, generated a wound inside me, that it's a shadow aspect of my personality. And whenever I had to do sales, then that part was coming online. And our brain, our consciousness is very wise, and it's going to try to protect you from it by all means. So then whenever something is triggered, whenever the small t is triggered, then it's gonna light up all the red flags and be like, okay, get away from it, get away, like make this conversation end. And the way that I had to end it was like by providing a lot of arguments. But the point is, there's a part of me that was hidden in the shadows. I wasn't seeing it. And it would come across maybe as my assertive personality, or as something that I was doing consciously, but it wasn't conscious. So let's recap, because that was where a lot of concepts.
Yeah.
So personality is more your character traits, who you are. Are you introverted, extroverted? Are you more of a people person? Are you more of a object-oriented person?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
So very common behaviors or thoughts that just repeat and sort of make a distinct you. You have different behaviors than any other person. And so these we pick out as, oh, that's a trait that you repeatedly do.
Yes. And then we have the shadow, which is anything that's originated in trauma, in patterns that you had in your childhood, that it's an unconscious part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Personality is not necessarily conscious, but this part is hidden. This part is the dark side of the moon, let's say. And that makes you do things that you don't really know why you're doing them, but they come from that place of protecting and
I think
surviving.
A term that fits perfectly is also the subconscious that Jung introduced. Is like, okay, there's something underneath our awareness, something underneath our consciousness that we cannot perceive, but it has a huge impact, maybe even a bigger one that we consciously can't perceive. Mm-hmm. And yeah, those aspects exactly fall into that. Then from some sort of trauma, you didn't really understand it or know what's doing with you. And then, for example, in your case, I remember I was excluded and that felt like a lot of pain to you. And when that happens, your mind is great, or your consciousness, and tries to protect you from it again. Mm-hmm. And that was helpful in that situation, but at some point it might not be anymore. So it was a coping strategy to not receive that pain anymore. Mm-hmm. And now your subconscious just continues that. Yeah. And now it becomes shadow because it's not adaptive anymore.
Yeah. And it's funny how being rejected from a group in high school makes me not want to do sales as an adult building my business. So the brain patterns are the same, because the brain doesn't distinguish between a situation of with peers in high school and a situation with other business owners as an adult. So that's the funny thing, and that's why it's so important to check the shadows. And the other concepts that we were exploring were traumas, big trauma, small trauma. Either of those can generate a shadow. Mm-hmm. And
how would you define now shadow again exactly? What is your perception?
It's from Jung.
Yeah.
Carl Jung. And he would say basically anything that falls behind consciousness. So your consciousness is anything you're aware of. Are you a person that likes dogs or cats? Are you a person that wants to cook or just like eats whatever, doesn't care about how it tastes? Mm-hmm. What kind of things do you enjoy in life? Okay, that's personality. You are aware of it. It's easy to get to know yourself in that area. Shadow is what lies beyond, is the hidden side of the moon that is half of the moon. And we all have it. We all have it to a bigger or lesser extent. And that's the part of us that is, our brain is protecting us from it.
Yeah.
We don't see it consciously. We usually need to go to therapy to start seeing the patterns, or somebody might be able to point it out and tell us, like, do you know you always freak out when I tell you to take out the trash? What's up with that? It can be different things. We can tell examples of you as well.
Yeah.
But those are the shadow aspects that we all have. And it's important that we do the work to get to know the shadow, because the shadow is going to affect us whether we know it or not. But if we know it, we can work with it. For example, I can start doing sales, even though my shadow tells me, don't deal with rejection. I'm like, I'm dealing with rejection. I will do this. And I know it might hurt, or it might revive, is that a word? It might resuscitate some trauma from before, but it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I will be able to deal with it. I will survive.
Yeah.
A no is not the end of the world. Maybe it was when I was a teenager, and that's like my whole identity was hanging on a tiny thread. But now as an adult, I have more resources, and it's fine. I can deal with rejection.
And I think now it's really important. Why do we bring this up? Why do we say personality trait versus shadow? Because it's such a fine line between, oh, that's just what I do. So many people, you hear that, I think in a coaching session recently, it was a person having one day off a week. And usually he's been, I think, super, super deep into work, building his career, and putting the most focus on that. And now he has a day off. So basically it's a 4 day week. 4 day a week. And now he wants to, like, the thing was now, okay, what do I do? How do I fill this gap now? How can I make sure that I've put my focus on the right things and work hard on that day and don't be lazy? Mm-hmm. And there's a thing of, a person, eager to wanting to do things, having energy, and just, you see when somebody's motivated, inspired to make a change, to do something, to wanting to create something. We have a drive for that, right? We as humans. And there's then the shadow aspect of, hey, I'm just doing that to cope with the trauma that I'm only worthy when I work enough, when I show enough results. And I think why it's important that we bring this up is that I guess we really want to take care of that we don't fall into those subconscious things that are running the show most of the time. Mm-hmm. Because quite often it comes from trauma, as you said, and that drives us towards just having a life lived based on trauma. And in the end, we're wondering, why did that happen? Mm-hmm. Because we just let it run. We didn't reflect on it. Yeah. And then, because in those coaching sessions, it becomes very clear that the values that you have for yourself, what you think is important. Oh, family is really important, and I really want to make an impact on other people, and I don't want to spend enough time with my parents still. And then there's the aspect of, but I want to work 50 hours a week. Mm-hmm. And something is not matching between the values, what's important for you in your life, and the actions. I think that's a nice hint as well. Yeah. Some dissonance in your behavior and your beliefs.
Yeah. And I think what's another clue is when you are completely reluctant of
sorry,
dying in the middle of the podcast.
Need to learn how to drink. Please go on.
When you're completely reluctant of going to the other end of the spectrum, for example, you are a person that identifies as introverted, and then because you're hiding in the introverted side, you use that to justify that you don't make any friends and you never go out and meet people. You never do an activity outside of your house. And that's when it turns to shadow. It's okay to be introverted and have a preference for something, but you still need to put yourself out of your comfort zone and go to the other end of the spectrum and sometimes take a Zumba class. Really go to the other side. So this shows up in many different ways. For me, sales, like maybe it's not the main thing that I want to do, but I still need to do it. And we had another example when we were talking about coaching the other day, where I was telling you that for me, it's important to know how to be confronting when you're coaching someone. And when I started saying that, I didn't want to impose on you that you have to be confronting, but you immediately went into like, yeah, that's your style, that's not me. And that's when it clicked in my mind. That's your shadow.
Yeah.
Because you don't like confrontation in general. And even if that's an important part of your coaching toolkit, you don't want to have it because you don't want to be confronting and at any point with anyone. And then I was bringing this up and I was like, I think there's a healthy confrontation that everybody needs to be able to hold, to have, especially if you're going to be a good full spectrum coach and deal with different personalities. And it doesn't mean that you will be constantly confronting people and making them sit at the edge of their seat all the time. But if push comes to shove, then you need to do it. It's better to know how to do it and not have to do it than just be completely reluctant of doing it. And if a situation requires it, still tapping out and not going for it.
Yeah, that's a grandiose example of really noticing when you just brought the topic up, I was pushing it away. I was like, oh yeah, it's your style. But we all know that this spectrum, also sometimes also called psychological flexibility, to be able to be in different states, to be confronting, to be more empathetic, to be more supportive, or really to push somebody to their limits. All of that spectrum I actually do want to have. It's skills. And it's very interesting that when those things come up, there's a trauma for me where I also noticed that I didn't learn really how to deal with conflict. That was very interesting because that was then coming up over and over again in other situations in my life, that there were situations where I was pushed into conflict and noticed that I got completely uncomfortable and didn't know how to act. I got weird and fidgety and I felt like I was distancing myself. It was distancing me from myself a little bit. It's not connected anymore. And so that was a great sign, noticing. And we had an awesome container then figuring out what was happening there. So it could actually go into it. And I think it is such an important skill for me to learn because I know if I don't learn it, I have always this weakness. As soon as somebody is open for confrontation or has just a confrontational energy, I'm going away. The subconscious, the subconscious thing that just wants me to back off a little bit instantly, just fearing already the conflict. So there's some personalities who are just having a strong energy and just wherever they go, they are not really visibly pushy or confrontational, but they have the strong energy that if something happens, they would go through it and have the anger and create a lot of tremendous energy. And when you feel that, then you're basically hopeless, or you don't have any way to deal with it. And I think that's super, super important to be able to have the tools. So for me right now, what I do, I need to confront myself now with conflict to practice it, because I need to get rid of it. Otherwise, I'm constantly, I don't want to say get rid of it, but rather learn to deal with it. Otherwise, I constantly can be pushed around like people pleasers.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because for me, if that's my shadow and I don't deal with it, I can just be pushed around like anyone at once, right? I need to be able to not fear it anymore. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, yeah, I can't be authentically me, be assertive to what I want.
Yeah. I remember one time that I was moving away. I was in the Netherlands and I was moving away for a month. So I was subletting my apartment. And when I went back, then the girl that was subletting it took a bunch of stuff from me. So took a bunch of things from the kitchen and burnt the carpet. And I called her, I called her and I told her, can you return these things? And she came back and brought me the things. She didn't notice that she had taken those things. And then I talked to her about the carpet. And then she was saying that the carpet wasn't worth that much, or that she didn't want to pay for it. It was a used carpet. I was like, well, I bought it new, and now that it's burned, it's screwed. So I was trying to avoid conflict, and I took it as far as I could to avoid conflict. I was repeating the same thing. My objective was that she would reimburse me for half the cost of the carpet, and she didn't want to pay anything. So that's where we were standing. And because I didn't want to be mean or not have a friend, then I would hold myself back. But at some point, when I noticed enough resistance and that she was flipping, I was like, okay, friendship is out of the window. This person clearly has no emotional control and is being manipulative right now. So then let's get into conflict. And I remember I matched her energy without losing my center. And I was telling her, I understand what you're saying, but in the agreement that we have and then the contract that you signed, if it said that if you ever break something, that you need to replace it. And then she was like, but it's not worth it. And I was like, it's not about if it's worth what you think it's worth. It's about the contract that we have. It's not a flexible thing. So then it became really assertive. And she was throwing everything she could at me. And I was still bouncing it back and being like, okay, if you're not going to pay me for the carpet, I'm still not going to let you get away with it as if I'm the bad woman here. I am going to make it very clear that you're the one in the wrong in the situation. And if you still decide to go with that, go with it. But it's not okay. Like, I'm not being okay with it. So then we're in conflict, like open conflict. Nothing was going to happen. I was not going to get a lawyer and sue her for like 35 euros. It didn't make sense. But the fun part of the story was that after that happened, I was so happy that I was able to stand my ground and to not get off center or like go into aggressive or manipulative ways. I was very happy with how I handled conflict, and you were listening the whole conversation, like at the top of the stairs. And when I found you, you were pale. You were like sweating.
Now again, going through it, I notice it. I'm reacting still, just going through the story.
Yes, you were suffering. I was in the conflict. I knew that, okay, this needs to happen. There's no avoiding the conflict anymore. But you were listening to the conflict and freaking out. Yeah. And then, like, afterwards I was fine. And I was like, okay, so let's have some tea or something. And then he was shaking. You were like completely traumatized by the whole conflict that you were never a part of.
Yeah. Now it's so funny to like look at it, but I don't know, it's a little bit embarrassing too to see like how much that affects me when just, two women downstairs are having a fight and I'm going completely like physical responses to it. But I guess that's where I start out right now.
Yeah.
Well, that was a while ago, but I
Yeah,
think
it was a
it's
while.
better already. But that's where I started out, being like so terrified of conflict that like the energy, like now that you bring it up, you got into the
Yeah.
conflict energy. I noticed this immediately,
Yeah.
and it is very difficult for me to just not react to it, and I notice it viscerally.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, but that's the trauma.
yeah, that's exactly that. That's a nice, I guess, nice way of finding out what is trauma and what's not by the response that you have. And it's so intense for, two people having a fight. If the neighbors do that, you just out there again. But this somehow was really getting me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's a nice sign to figure out that this is trauma and not a personality trait of trying to people please me, because I wasn't even in there.
Yeah.
I wasn't even in the conflict.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But in your case, it's like it's not necessarily like big T trauma, but more exposure to models that don't necessarily know how to deal with conflict either.
Yeah. So far I have two options that I learned, I guess, from the beginning. One is to, at some point...
Your mother and father.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At one point, my mom is starting to just be guilty or guilt-tripping my dad, or vice versa, and getting just like silencing it and sort of finishing the conversation. And my dad is just walking away.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, it's just like when it gets to a conflict, you notice, it's not easily calmable anymore. He just leaves.
Yeah.
So like, this is too much now. I'll go. Bye. And he
Yeah.
just literally just leaves. My mom is just being angry and keeps the energy within her all day, maybe over multiple days.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's how I learned it, and that's what I need to unlearn again and then relearn.
Yeah.
And it's a nice process because I really see how much it's affecting me and how much potential is in there once I can actually really deal with that, because there's so much possibility in being assertive or knowing how to go after what you want and knowing what you want. If you're too much people pleaser, sometimes I notice I don't even know what I want based on, what do you want? How can I help you finding your thing? Because that's even more going out of conflict. Because I know conflict can exist if I don't have any wishes or desires.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the ultimate extreme when I don't even know what I want of the fear of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, I think, a really nice sign, and good that you brought it up to really go into it. How does it look like? That's now one of my perspectives, and one is of yours is the being abandoned from the sales.
Yeah, the rejection part.
Yeah.
So I think we all have one big wound or a thing, a recurring theme that we have throughout our lives. And that's, we need to know what that is. That's our shadow, that it's going to manifest in many different situations, in a whole range of topics. Like for me, fear of rejection also means fear of conflict in a way, because I don't want to be enemies with anybody. I mean, enemies is a big word, but even if I don't like a person, I still want them to like me. Even if I don't necessarily want to be friends with them.
Yeah.
And I really admire that from you, that you, like, if you don't like a person, you don't care. Like, you act like they don't exist. Like, it's fine. Like, whatever. They do their thing, out of my thing. You move on. But I still have that thing within me that is like, just leaving a free agent out there that doesn't like me, that's potentially dangerous, because those were the people that actually campaigned against me and then got me excluded of the group.
Yeah.
And that's originally how it happened. Like, it was usually either a good friend that got jealous or got angry or was trying some manipulative tactic and just invented stories about me, or well, somebody that just didn't like me, and then they would just do a campaign against me. And that's why right now I cannot let that happen anymore, you know? Well, subconsciously, consciously, I know that you cannot be liked by everybody.
Yeah.
And even if I know that, I will still act to like people please and be nice and maybe put a facade when I don't like somebody, because I'm still afraid that they will talk shit behind my back and make other people not like me.
Yeah.
And that's bananas. Like going around the world like that is bananas.
It's so funny to like really be aware of this, that this is happening. And I know this for a while now. And yet all the time in those situations, it happens over and over again. And I notice it in the moment, and I yet still can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So I really need to practice it more. And I think with you, it's very similar. You go now all in with sales to really notice how it feels to get rejected and notice how you can actually deal with it. So you're practicing a lot now.
Yes, the rejection, and also accepting that I won't be liked by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And recently I had a situation with a friend where we realized we're not a good match anymore. That like nothing wrong happened, but we're just not matching energetically on the way that our paths are going.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that this friend that we had been friends for a very, very long time. She was going a completely different path, more in the like social media, but social media as in aesthetics of the social media, and partying a lot.
A bit status,
Like concentrated in growing the status, the circle of friends, like having a huge circle of friends and things like that. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But whenever I would hang out with her, I would feel so drained. And I knew that she wasn't excited to see me either. Like we were not happy in each other's presence. So then we talked and we decided, okay, let's let the friendship go. But there's still a whole group of friends around that person. So then I felt very scared of being excluded of the whole group, even if we're adults and I know that she won't do intentionally a PR campaign against me. But yeah, it felt very threatening to me to do that. But it would still do that because authenticity prevails for me. For me, it's more important to be authentic, and if a friendship doesn't work anymore, to let it go, than to stay in that friendship for the fear of being rejected from the group. So that was a step that I took, and it's still draining. It still takes a lot of power, power away from you, like it, in a way, and in another way, it gives power to you because you are being the most authentic person you can be. But the shadow part is just taking you down, baby. It's just, it's difficult because it's still trauma.
It comes back, and you really feel in those moments that the almost the power gets sucked away from you. The ability to decide how you want to act and how you want to behave. Sometimes disappears and you fall into those old patterns and those old habits. For me, it's just trying somehow to get out of conflict. For you, it's like somehow pleasing so they're not, I guess, doing a PR campaign against you. Mm-hmm. And I think the point is really that there are behaviors that run subconsciously, and very important to become aware of them. Otherwise, they just are on autopilot. You can't like go against it because you don't even know where you're going, right?
Yeah.
And I think the important part is as well to first off, I guess, really realize what's happening in those moments when you're triggered. You notice something is going on, and then also actively trying to seek what you can do about it, learn from it. What is it? Where's it coming from? Mm-hmm. And then eventually, I guess, trying to counteract.
Yeah. I think when we're coaching, this is one of the big things that we do.
Yeah.
We find the shadow patterns of people and see, oh, there's a lot of people pleasing and conflict avoidance, or this person tends to get very aggressive whenever somebody steps into whatever their small t trauma is.
Yeah.
You just find those things, you take them from the shadow to the light, and then the other person can start to connect the dots. You connect the dots backwards because you're like, okay, this happened so many times throughout my life. Also because we keep on repeating the same pattern. Like if it happened twice, it will happen twice more. I mean, it's not.
And if it happens in the job, it happens in your family, it happens in sports.
Yeah.
It's running through everything.
Yes.
It's not just a separate thing most of the times.
Yeah.
That you just behave with your boss like that, but there are constantly some people in your life that trigger that certain behavior.
Yeah. And certain personalities that will trigger that. Like for you, authoritative personalities will trigger that.
Yeah.
And for me, like shady women that have, like, you don't know their intentions, that they feel a bit like at the edge of being jealous or aggressive, like people that I cannot figure out. Yeah. People that I cannot figure out. If they come in my vicinity, then I start freaking out because I'm like, this person I need to walk on eggshells around them. But also with clients, what are the patterns that we keep on seeing, repeating, and what are the things that we can bring to light for them to start healing that trauma and to not operate from the shadow? Because the whole point of knowing that there's a shadow is to not operate from it. Because the more we operate from the shadow, the less in control, or the less agency we have over our lives. We're just running on old code, on something that was programmed when we were little or teenagers, and then it just kept on running for the rest of our lives. And it's not who you are. Like also, like that would be another distinction to make, because we were saying personality versus shadow. Personality, yes, those personality traits are the things that are relatively stable throughout your life, and it's a preference. Let's say there's no right or wrong way of doing it. And with shadow, sort of there is a right way of doing things. And the right way of doing things is to have a preference, but still be able to operate in the full spectrum. Yeah. What I mean by that is the introvert that goes to the Zumba class. We were saying that before. And in my case, to still be able to trust people, even if I fear that they might not like me or whatever my mind is running at that moment, and to be more okay with rejection.
Yeah. To
let go of that. And then that would be for me the full spectrum.
Why is it so important to work on this though? Why? Because we could also let it run and it's fine. Sometimes it's not influencing us that much, or we don't notice it that much. Why would you say it's important to work on your shadow and to sort of try to deal with those underlying patterns?
For the agency. Because if you are operating from your shadow, you're not the one making the decisions. Your trauma is. And whenever you're reacting from your trauma, you're not living your full potential. You're just protecting yourself. You're just operating from a survival place. When you are aware of your shadow and you're like, this situation triggers me, but I'm still gonna take the decision that is the most aligned with myself. For example, for me, ending the relationship with this friend, then you are taking ownership, and even if shit hits the fan, even if things don't go well, you are being authentic and honoring your highest truth. And I think that's important in general when you're to live a life that is the most authentic you.
Telling the truth in all things, basically. Commitments to yourself, other people, yourself in general, in your mind. Just trying to figure out what's the truth for you. That's already very difficult, but I think that's a nice way to, really notice it. Yeah. When you said something you could commit to, or something you did commit to but didn't follow through. Mm-hmm. But also just, when do you notice that you change words to, because you think the other person would like that more. Mm-hmm. Or when there's you just notice when something is off, or when you cannot say the true thing that you want to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to train yourself to be authentic to who you are. It doesn't necessarily mean that at every moment you need to know your highest truth and you need to be perfectly aware of everything that happens within you. But it means that whenever you have the ability to take your time to make a decision, and whether if that time is a couple of breaths or a few days, that you make the decision that is not based on the shadow, on the fear of rejection and the fear of conflict, that you make the decision that it's still the most authentic, the most aligned, and the best that you can do. That is a decision that you make in that moment, but it's a vote for the type of person that you will become later. Because whenever you are stepping into the ground of personal development, of not being afraid of your shadow, of overcoming your trauma, you're becoming a higher version of yourself. You're choosing the big boy pants, the big girl pants. You are deciding for your highest expression instead of the shadow aspects. And with that done over time, you become an awesome person to be around, because you will start healing all of this trauma. You will not operate from the shadow. You can perceive it when somebody is a very healthy person, that they work through their shit. And it doesn't matter how much shit they had to go through. Because there's people that have it easy in life. Nobody has it easy in life. It's completely false that somebody has an easy life. That doesn't happen. But there's people that have to go through a lot and have the trauma that we have together, both plus 55 big T traumas. And they have a tougher path ahead. But again, the same formula applies. And if they start doing this and start being the most authentic self and overcoming their shadow, or getting to know their shadow and working with it, then they will still become this awesome people. How come the people that made the most awesome things in the world, they come from a shit context? Like Tony Robbins with his drug addict mother and like being in poverty, having to fight through his whole life. Like if you're able to alchemize all of that trauma and all of that into all of that negativity or difficulties into personal development, then you become a force to be reckoned with, because you've been through the shit. You know the shadow. You're not afraid of it. And at the same time, you learn to overcome it.
How? What's the strategies that I guess people can use to stand out? Like, what's the things that people can actually do on their own to deal with it?
I think the shadow, it's very sneaky. Well, that's the whole point. That's what we said. It's hidden.
It's unconscious usually, yeah.
Yes, it's unconscious. So it's difficult for a person to realize what they've been doing their whole life, what they consider is true, that's their shadow. It's difficult to see. It's so close to your eye that it falls away from your view, your field of view.
What would you then suggest? Or could be a way, or that how do you do it?
Well, I did it a lot with journaling and writing down and figuring out the patterns. It's like, what situations do I encounter myself repeatedly? And going back, reading my journal and being like, oh, okay, look, this happened here, here, and here. What are the common points of this? Because whenever we need to learn a lesson in life, then we will encounter it over and over again until we find a new way to deal with it and we grow out of that lesson. So a great way is to analyze the patterns in your life.
Yeah.
And that's the visible part of it. Like, oh, I seem to be friends with people that are assholes. Or like I've had it with friends that they kept on dating the wrong dude, like the wrong type of dude, and an aggressive, manipulative dude. And it's like, how come you get all of those? Like,
there must be a pattern somewhere.
Yes, I never experienced that. How come you are always attracting this type of person in your life? So whenever we see a pattern, it's okay. Then let's start with that.
Check.
I always find funny the quote of like, all men are the same, or all women are the same. And it's for you. They are all the same for you because you attract the same type of person over and over again. And that's a way. So figure out what are the patterns. What are the things that keep on repeating in your life? The other way is to go to therapy. And a good psychologist will be able to spot those shadow patterns in an instant, like at a glance. You will tell your story, and within the story, within the telling of your story to another person, you will repeat ways of thinking. You will have your beliefs all sprinkled in your narrative, and then the other person that is trained to listen for those things will tell you, oh, I see that you have a lack of self-belief. So you don't trust yourself, so then that creates this constant repeating of people abusing you or not taking you for granted, not taking you seriously. And then that's a pattern. And they will be able to spot it with like a falcon eye, because it's obvious. It's obvious for the person that is trained to see it and sees it from outside. So that's another way. The other way is to do psychedelics. It's not recommended for everybody, of course, but I think mushrooms, for example, there has been so many studies done that they help expand your perspective because it activates neuroplasticity in the brain. So you start making new neural connections, and the same situation that you've been seeing from a very narrow perspective through your whole life, then if you think about it while on mushrooms, then you gain a completely new perspective from it. And the whole point of it is doing it therapeutically. It's not
psychedelic assisted therapy. Yeah.
Yes, it's psychedelic assisted therapy. It's not like just go to a party and do mushrooms there. It's not going to help. That's the shadow part. That's like, okay, you're evading reality and you're just trying to have fun, but which it's okay to do. But still, if you want to work on your shadow, you can use psychedelics as a means to an end, as a vehicle.
To just amplify, to see more clearly what's going on.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes happens, that you either those things that you shadows is amplified, or the possibility of who you can be is shown as well.
Yeah.
And I think I love the thing that you said actually a bit earlier, that with every action, with every thing that you do, you give a vote for who you want to be. So also the quote, how you do one thing is how you do everything, just applies to those things, I think, very, very nicely. That also the commitment to, hey, I really want to learn to be the best version of myself, how I can do that. Committing to just the growth part, so committing to development. Because what that does is, whenever you encounter a situation, whenever you encounter, oh, I was triggered there, or I noticed that I was off in that situation, people pleasing, sales, whatever it is for you, right? Then you have to do something about it. Just a commitment of, hey, because I want to be this kind of person. And in order to be that kind of person, I cannot fall prey to this trauma all over and over again. I think that's important to, like, this mindset shift. It's to actually do something about it.
Yes. So we covered a lot.
Yeah.
We also ventilated our own trauma and shadows.
I think that's super useful to really see how that could look like.
Yes. And it's gonna look different for everybody, and not. It's gonna look the same for everybody. It's a different dress on the same mannequin. It's because we are always coming back to a couple of fundamental traumas that we can get. And it's the fear of rejection, it's the fear of change, the fear of the unknown, the fear of death. And those are the things that, as humans, trigger us and make an attack on our life and our existence. So then whatever those things are, we will defend our consciousness from them with everything we have. So yeah, it's important to know which ones those are for you. You have them. Everybody has them. And when they come up, knowing how to deal with them. And you only know how to deal with them by dealing with them in different ways. And it's a lifelong journey. It doesn't get solved in a year. Like, honestly, it takes so long. But yeah, it's important to know how it feels in your body. For example, do you get scared? Like, do you get like you need to run from the situation, or you get really aggressive and you need to confront in that situation? Do you feel attacked? Do you feel vulnerable? Those are the things that can give you a hint of what is triggering you, what is bringing up some shadow in you. And from that place, then you also need to, once you spot it, the shadows, you slowly learn how to deal with them. That's it. That's the process.
Yeah.
And we already said a few things that you can do about it too. But the point here is to make ourselves comfortable going to the other side of the spectrum, even if the other side of the spectrum is not allowing us to get there because it's shadow. That's a complicated sentence. But it's basically what we were saying of personality. There are things that are choices. I choose to have a friendly relationship with people. I choose to be kind. I choose to like everybody that comes my way, find something to like about them. Yeah. That's what I choose. But if something comes to my life, if someone comes to my life that is, like, I cannot find a way to love them, I cannot find a way to like them, or that I really need to take somebody out of my life, then I also need to be able to do that.
So what it gives you is a little bit the freedom, the agency to act. Really, I guess bringing the concept back to the psychological flexibility of being okay with being super kind to the person that you like, but also being very assertive to set boundaries and protect yourself in a way if that's necessary.
Yeah.
So that whole being able to act in the whole spectrum and not being swayed by other people or personalities in that regard.
Yeah. And I think one last thing that wasn't maybe necessarily clear is, how do you distinguish between personality and shadow? We said that how it feels.
Yeah.
Like personality feels right. It's like a preference. Do you want olives on your pizza? Yes, I want olives on my pizza.
No, definitely
You
not.
definitely don't. But that's a preference. There's nothing wrong with olives. It's not like, oh, you need to learn how to eat olives.
You're not gonna get me too.
You tried. But shadow is more like, there's no way that I can do that because it's threatening to my system. Yeah. It's not a preference. And it feels like that. It feels like it's threatening to your system.
Yeah. When you see it from the outer perspective, or as a psychologist in a coaching session, you notice that's usually a way over the top reaction for nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that's usually a good sign when you notice, oh, he could have said just, oh no, I'm like to a work email after hours. Did you do the project? I was like, no, I didn't finish it yet. Mm-hmm. Or, oh fuck, I didn't. I'll do this and I'll make this later.
The whole weekend, I'll be
yeah.
the whole night awake, and yeah.
And then you notice, oh, there's something on trigger. Something's off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
That's one way. If it was not clear, feel free to reach out to us.
Yes, please, because I think it's a really difficult topic to notice how it is for yourself. Mm-hmm. I think we did our best to describe how it is for us. And if you feel like you want to dive deeper into it, I guess we're super open to. Obviously, that's our job. So
that's what we do.
That's what we do. So obviously, feel free to contact us and figure it out for yourself if you can, just through journaling, through experiences, and just be curious about how you react.
Yeah. Go within, people.
Go with that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us together listening to this. And thank you for giving so much awesome advice from, I guess, psychological perspective, but also your personal one. Mm-hmm. And love to see you next week again.
Thank you for co-hosting. It was a pleasure as always. And thank you for listening, peoples. See you next week. Well, hear you next week.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.